Hey guys, welcome to the latest iHelp video. We're going to be comparing the Microsoft Surface Pro 7 versus the iPad Pro 12.9-inch. Let's get into the video. Before we do, be sure to like and subscribe. Let's get into this video. So, let's talk about the Surface Pro, screen-wise. It has a 12.4-inch screen. I'm not exactly sure the specifications of this screen, but it's a pretty nice screen. Another great feature is that it has facial recognition, just like the iPad Pro, which is a 12.9-inch liquid retina display. The iPad Pro has almost a 4K display, just not quite. It's an amazing display. Both are amazing. We can see that the iPad Pro is a much smaller device because of its smaller bezels. The Surface Pro has larger bezels, but the processor is very different. The Surface Pro runs Windows, so it has an Intel Core i5 processor. You can also configure an Intel Core i3 processor, but I wouldn't recommend that because it probably wouldn't have as much speed. But the iPad Pro uses a custom Apple Silicon A12X chip. It has 8 cores of CPU and 7 cores of GPU. If you're new with the M1 or A12Z iPad Pro, you'll have 8 cores for both the CPU and the GPU. Okay, let's talk about keyboard-wise. This is a very big issue that a lot of people are having. In the Surface Pro versus iPad Pro ad, they said, "I love that click of the keyboard." So the Surface Pro keyboard does click in. You can see the magnetically attaches, but unlike the iPad Pro, it only covers the back here. It's a little bit up, which is sometimes helpful for typing, but you can also put it in a different typing position. I'm pretty sure the Surface Pro, all Surface Pro configurations have a kickstand, something that the Surface Pro has offered ever since its birth. And I'm pretty sure the type cover, let's see if we can bring the type cover backwards like this, and Surface Pro just falls off. You can't do that with this, so let's reattach it to the Surface Pro. Another thing is that the Surface Pro has a Surface Pen. The one disadvantage to the Surface Pen is that it has a battery inside it, so we can see that you'll have to replace that battery. The person who's using the Surface Pro doesn't really use the pen that much because it's not really an essential accessory, but if you're buying like a combo pack from Costco or Amazon, you might have this included, so you're like, might as well just buy it for less price and use it once in a while. So that's our Surface Pen. Now let's look at our iPad Pro. Our iPad Pro is an amazing device, except it has 2 keyboard configurations. You can get the Smart Keyboard Folio or the all-new Magic Keyboard. The Magic Keyboard has a cantilever design and comes in 2 colors. The Smart Keyboard Folio, though, is much lighter and it's much easier to attach. Although the Magic Keyboard is very good, and I do recommend getting that if you're going to use your iPad Pro as your main computer, it does cost a hefty $350 for the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Also, the new iPad Pro 12.9-inch from 2020 is the same size as this iPad Pro, so you don't need to buy a new Magic Keyboard for that. But the problem is that if you're new with the 2021 iPad Pro, I don't think anybody was able to buy that at the time of this release from the video, but you can get the Magic Keyboard again. I'm pretty sure you have to because the new iPad Pro is 6.4 millimeters thick, which is kind of disappointing because you have to pay $350 again. Let's look at the back. The whole enclosure of the iPad Pro is beautiful. Let's actually detach both the Surface Pro and the iPad Pro. This is what the iPad Pro looks like. We made a great video of iPad Pro creating the ultimate desk setup, so you can be sure to check that out. Let's look at the Surface Pro. The Surface Pro is basically a computer as you just boot it up because it runs Windows. Although many argue that you should get the Surface Pro rather than the iPad Pro in a quick decision, they are mistaken. The Surface Pro has a lot of different features from the iPad, including apps. So, the Surface Pro can run all of your favorite desktop apps like Photoshop, except the iPad Pro can, but it runs much more. It has a touchscreen-based interface. The Surface Pro can use touchscreen, but it's not optimized for that. So although some may say the Surface Pro is a tablet, it's really not. It's just a 2-in-1 PC that you have to buy the keyboard separately. The keyboard also has a trackpad, and it's in this nice, I think it's Elantra material. Please correct me in the live chat if that's incorrect. It has a trackpad and backlit keys. Another thing that the Magic Keyboard is missing is function keys. Though that is very different. The connector is very different from the smart connector on the iPad Pro. It has, let's see how many pins it has. It has 6 pins and these 2 little magnetic attachy things. A little bit of a number on the back. It also says Microsoft on the back here. And the keyboard, the keys you can really feel. On here, it's more like a cloth because this is like actual keys. So this only covers the bottom of the Surface Pro. Like you can see on the smart keyboard for iPad Pro, 1st generation, 2nd generation, iPad 6th, 7th, and 8th generation, and iPad Air 3rd generation. But the new Smart Keyboard Folio covers the full iPad in front and back protection. So the iPad Pro definitely wins in that category. But as far as productivity, the Surface Pro wins for the function keys and the trackpad. On the Surface Pro, it was built for this because it has those little connectors that connect right here to here. iPad Pro also has a smart connector, but it's just 3 pins. It's a really great connector, and it's really quick to attach, so we can just see those 3 pins there, just like the 6 pins, 3 pins, 6 pins, 3 pins. Let's actually see if the Surface Pro can kind of fit on the iPad Pro. I'm guessing not because it has more pins. So, as far as OS, iPad OS is a very different OS than Surface, which is Microsoft Windows 10. They have different apps. Let's talk about ports. The iPad Pro has 1 USB-C port, which is great for connecting to all of your things. The Surface Pro has a USB-C port and a USB-A port, as well as the Microsoft Fast Charge port. The one thing that I don't like about the Microsoft Fast Charge port is that you have to get a separate accessory that you have to bring everywhere instead of just bringing a USB-C accessory that you get for the iPad Pro. So the Surface Pro is definitely a loser in some ways there, that you have to use a separate cord to charge, but it's also a winner that has more ports than the single port on the iPad Pro. Let's talk about speakers. The speakers on the Surface Pro are kind of hidden. They're in here, even though it has a fanless design. The iPad Pro has 4 speakers. 1 here, and then 2 on the top. 1 there and 1 there. As far as music is, definitely the iPad Pro wins here, because iPadOS has a much easier to use interface, but Windows 10 has more apps and it has more power. So you have to decide if you want it to be easy to use or hard to use, because you're going to get Windows errors, like blue screen errors, just like you would on any other Windows device, but on the iPad Pro you won't get those errors almost ever. I've never ran into any of those errors. Battery life. So the battery life depends. I mean, you can run multiple different tests. The Surface Pro usually lasts, it's usually plugged in here, so you can't really tell, but the iPad Pro usually lasts like 8 to 10 hours, which is what it was said when we bought the iPad Pro. So as far as cameras, I would definitely say the iPad Pro wins here, because it has a true depth camera system. It's interesting because Microsoft tried to copy the true depth camera system, or maybe they did it first, right here, and has almost all the same cameras. It's pretty weird. And it's interesting because that infrared, I think it's a dot projector, actually you can see it instead of on the iPad Pro where it's invisible, and you can only see it when you are on like a Zoom meeting or take a photo. Pencil, Apple Pencil versus Surface Pen. We talked about how the Surface Pen has a battery. The Apple Pencil just magnetically charges, so iPad Pro is winner there. So, we are at the end of our competition. It's been a short one, but both are winners here. If you're a student who needs to take notes really fast and get all those apps, like me, iPad Pro is definitely a winner for you. If you're someone who wants a laptop, but also wants a touchscreen interface, then the Surface Pro is for you. You can tell us in the live chat and like this video to let us know if we should keep making more comparison videos. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.